Hi, I'm Karen Quinn, Curator of Art and Culture here at the New York State Museum, and I'm going to give you a sneak peek behind the scenes of some of the works in the historic Woodstock art collection given to us by Arthur A. Anderson. And a couple of years ago, we actually had an exhibition that showed some of the highlights of this collection, which ranges in date from 1902 all the way up to pretty close to the present. And Arthur Anderson gave us some 1,500 works that we have gratefully started to research, hopefully with a publication in its near future, as well as an online exhibit, hopefully, in the near future. And if you are interested in some of the background of Woodstock as an art colony, not the 1969 music festival, take a look on our website under exhibitions. Go to the past exhibitions and scroll down, and you'll see you can click on a PDF of the brochure we produced, as well as some lesson plans for teachers and some other information. And Woodstock as an art colony dates to about beginning in 1902 with the development of the site called Birdcliff. And many of these sites are still in existence, and you can go visit them in Woodstock. And Birdcliff was a utopian community, and that really kicked off the Woodstock experience. By 1906, the Art Students League had its summer school up in Woodstock, and then other artists started to come as well, and it became quite a rich colony of artists sharing their ideas. One of the artists who is most richly represented in the Anderson collection is George Bellows. And Bellows is probably also one of the more familiar names to American art historians, as he was worked very prominently in New York City. He was also a member of a group that was called the Ash Can School, a sort of derogatory term, because they featured realistic views of the city, often with, as we call it, gritty urban subject matter like back alleys, thus the name Ash Can School. And Bellows came to Woodstock at the invitation of his friend, Eugene Spiker. And Spiker had found Woodstock as a wonderful place to spend the summers, and also there was a big teaching community there for the Art Students League. And in the Anderson collection of the historic Woodstock art colony is included over almost 200 works by George Bellows, and it's the biggest section of works by one single artist in a collection that features almost 200 artists. And I just wanted to show you why this is so important, and why this makes the collection what is called a study collection. There are no paintings by George Bellows in this collection. Instead, Arthur Anderson decided to focus on works of a more intimate nature, works on paper, and the prolific outpouring of prints that George Bellows made over his lifetime. And just to show you the range here, first we have an image, a cartoon, if you will, by Bellows early in his career. Like so many of those artists affiliated with the Ash Can School, these artists would produce imagery for publication in magazines, often satirical. Sometimes they weren't published at all. And Bellows, who came from Ohio, trained in a style initially that was very much different than what it would become. His early work, though you can't tell from this, would often look like, if you can imagine, the Gibson girls, Charles Dana Gibson's images of women in the early 20th century, late 19th, early 20th century. This is just one instance of his satirical work. He also was very much involved with cartooning his friends, caricaturing his friends, and Ethel Clark was a friend of Bellows and the family. And complete with misspellings and so forth, made in crayon. And then we also see with Bellows some of how he actually worked. And compositional sketches, sketches of hands, sketches of cows, lots of images that get you into the artist's head and see where they start and how they would ultimately progress to the final product. And this is very important for us because we don't often get to see the artist's full body of work. And to see an artist, how an artist works through his ideas is very important. Often we just see the finished product, and the finished product, don't misunderstand me, is absolutely wonderful. But to get a little into the head of the artist and see where they come from and see the creative process also is very important for us in understanding an artist and also just understanding the whole idea of a creative process. And this is a landscape that Bellows was working on that may or may not have ended up actually as a finished painting. As I mentioned, Bellows was very prolific in terms of lithography, and his subject matter ranges from portraits of his family, which I'll show you in a minute, to illustrations for publications, and this one is a satirical one called The Critic, and the Art Critic, and here you can see some of the pomposity that we sometimes associate with art critics themselves. And this is printed on a very beautiful thin paper so that it has wonderful textures, and he often worked with another artist, a printmaker named Bolton Brown, who was perhaps the most important lithographer in the early 20th century. Finally, I'd like to introduce you to Bellows himself and his family, who were many of his best and favorite models over the years. Bellows is the gentleman in the back with the bald head. Perhaps not exactly what you would imagine an artist to look like, fully dressed without, hat or cape or anything, any accoutrements. That's his wife Emma and his children. And he often used the children as his models in both his paintings and in his prints. This particular sofa, Victorian sofa, came from his parents' home in Ohio and is featured prominently in many of his works. And this gives you a sense of the intimacy of the family and the wonderful relationships as the different glances from one to the other or not, as you see in the image itself. And this was printed slightly before George Bellows passed away in 1925, very unexpectedly with gastrointestinal issues. So this is just a brief introduction to some of the works that we have in the historic Woodstock Art Colony collection here at the New York State Museum. It's a collection that's full of wonderful, wonderful surprises and intimate glimpses into a variety of artists' works, and Bellows certainly features as one of the big artists in this collection.